Nothing says happy marriage like separate beds in the same house. That's what I told myself every morning when I woke up to the sound of Harper brushing her teeth in our shared bathroom, the only thing we still shared besides a mortgage and mutual contempt. My name is Ray Donovan, and at 41, I've learned that life has a twisted sense of humor. I manage a warehouse in Blackstone, a blue-collar city in New England where everyone knows everyone else's business, and privacy is about as rare as a winning lottery ticket. The kind of place where Victorian apartments lean against each other like tired workers after a long shift, and the local sports bar serves as the unofficial town hall. Harper, my wife of 12 years, works as an HR manager downtown. At 36, she's got that polished look that comes from spending too much time in front of mirrors and not enough time being genuine. These days, she treats our house like a hotel and me like an inconvenient roommate who forgot to move out. "Ray, I'm working late again tonight," Harper announced, not looking up from her phone as she grabbed her coffee. Her voice had that practiced casualness that screamed rehearsed lie. "Third time this week," I said, stirring my own coffee. "Must be some project." She finally looked at me, and I caught something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance that I was paying attention. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." There it was, the dismissal, the subtle reminder that she considered herself above my blue-collar world. I'd been getting a lot of those lately, along with the mysterious phone calls she'd take in the next room, and the sudden interest in buying new clothes that never seemed to make it home. "Try me," I said, but she was already heading for the door, heels clicking against our hardwood floors like a countdown timer. After she left, I sat in our kitchen, looking around at the life we'd built together. The house was nice enough, a renovated Victorian we'd bought when we still believed in forever. Now it felt like a museum of better times, filled with photos of people who looked like us, but smiled more. My phone buzzed. Text from my brother Mike. "Coffee? You sound like you need it." Mike's an ex-cop who retired early after taking a bullet in the leg during a domestic dispute call. Now he runs security for a local casino and has developed an uncanny ability to read people's moods from a single text message. We met at Murphy's Diner, a greasy spoon that serves coffee strong enough to wake the sleeping. "You look terrible," Mike said, as I slid into the booth across from him. He was built like a linebacker who'd discovered donuts, but his eyes were still sharp as broken glass. "Thanks for the pep talk. Seriously, Ray, what's eating you?" I stirred my coffee and considered how much to tell him. Mike had always been protective of me, the younger brother who chose books over sports, sarcasm over aggression. Harper's been different lately. Different how? Late nights, mysterious phone calls, new clothes I never see her wear. Either she's planning a surprise party that's been going on for 3 months, or... I let the sentence hang there. Mike leaned back, his expression darkening. "You think she's stepping out?" "I think she's stepped so far out she's in another zip code." "You got proof?" "Just a gut feeling and a lot of circumstantial evidence." Mike drummed his fingers on the table. "Word of advice from someone who's seen this movie too many times. Don't go full vigilante. Get proof first, then decide what to do with it." That afternoon, I found myself really looking at our house for the first time in months. Harper had always been neat, but now everything felt staged, like a showroom. I started in our bedroom, not sure what I was looking for, but knowing I'd recognize it when I found it. In her dresser drawer, underneath a pile of lingerie I'd never seen her wear, my fingers found something that didn't belong. A small flip phone, the kind people buy when they don't want their activities traced back to their main number. My hands shook as I opened it. The text history was like reading a script for a bad soap opera. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that blue dress. He's working late again. Perfect timing. You're amazing. So much better than him." The contact was saved as S, but one message thread gave me the name I needed, Shane Mallory. I knew that name, Shane the Shark Mallory. a small-time entrepreneur who drove around town in a bright blue Mustang like he owned the place. Flashy, arrogant, and apparently sleeping with my wife. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I scrolled through more messages, each one a small knife twist. Photos, too. Harper in outfits I'd never seen, looking happier than she had in our house for years. One picture showed her with a shirtless guy who had to be Shane, both of them grinning like teenagers who'd just gotten away with something. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was how stupid they thought I was. The messages were full of jokes about Ray the Oblivious and how easy it was to fool me. Harper had even shared details about our private conversations, turning my genuine concerns about our marriage into punchlines for her affair. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and sat on our bed, staring at the wall. 12 years of marriage, and this is what it had come to. I felt like an actor who'd just discovered he was in a completely different play than everyone else. That evening, Harper came home at 11:30, claiming she'd grabbed dinner with her best friend Trixie after the late meeting. She smelled like cologne that wasn't mine and had that particular glow that comes from being thoroughly appreciated by someone who isn't your spouse. "How was your day?" she asked, the question automatic and empty. "Enlightening," I said. She looked at me sharply, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned something important today. I was much better at hiding my feelings than she was. While she'd been leaving a trail of evidence wide enough for a blind man to follow, I'd been the faithful husband, working my regular job, coming home every night, never suspecting a thing. Well, the suspecting part was over. Over the next few days, I developed a routine. Harper would leave for work. I'd check the burner phone for new messages, then head to my own job with a head full of intelligence about my wife's double life. The messages painted a picture of a woman I barely recognized. Passionate, spontaneous, exciting. Everything she used to be with me, and everything she'd stopped being years ago. Shane, from what I could gather from their conversations, was everything I wasn't. He owned a small business, something vague involving consulting and networking. He drove the flashy car, wore expensive clothes, and apparently had enough free time to meet Harper for afternoon encounters while I was loading trucks and managing inventory. The more I learned, the angrier I got. Not just at the betrayal, but at the complete disrespect. They weren't even trying to be discreet. Harper was using our house as a changing room, our bed as a place to plan her escapes, our shared life as material for their private jokes. But anger, I discovered, could be useful if you channeled it right. Instead of confronting Harper immediately, I decided to learn everything I could about both of them. Know your enemy, Mike always said. In this case, I had two enemies, and they were too busy enjoying themselves to notice they'd declared war on someone who was finally ready to fight back. I started following Harper, carefully and from a distance. It wasn't hard. She was so confident in her deception that she'd stopped looking over her shoulder. 3 nights that week, she met Shane at different locations around the city. A bar on the east side where they sat in a corner booth, hands all over each other. A restaurant downtown where they fed each other dessert like newlyweds. A parking lot behind a closed shopping center where Shane's Mustang rocked gently for 20 minutes, while I sat in my pickup truck, taking pictures with my phone. The photos were clear enough to leave no doubt about what was happening. Harper, my wife of 12 years, the woman who claimed to be working late, was having the time of her life with a man who looked like he belonged in a hair product commercial. But pictures were just the beginning. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. So I did something that would have horrified the old Ray, the trusting Ray, the Ray who believed in playing fair. I hired a private investigator. June Morrison was a former newspaper reporter who'd switched to private investigation when the local paper folded. She was in her 50s, sharp as a razor, and had the kind of cynical worldview that comes from years of uncovering other people's secrets. "Cheating spouse?" she asked when I walked into her small office above a sandwich shop. That obvious? You've got the look, hurt, angry, but trying to hold it together. What do you need to know? I told her about Harper and Shane, showed her the photos I'd taken, and explained what I'd learned from the burner phone messages. June listened without judgment, taking notes in a shorthand that looked like hieroglyphics. Shane Mallory, she said when I finished. I know that name. Give me a week, and I'll tell you everything about him that his mother doesn't know. While June did her work, I focused on mine. Not just the warehouse job that paid our bills, but the job of being a husband to a woman who'd already moved on. I started paying attention to Harper's stories, her explanations, her excuses. Every lie was like adding another piece to a puzzle that was finally starting to make sense. She'd gotten sloppy, confident that I was too trusting or too stupid to catch on. Phone calls that she'd take in the next room, speaking in low voices that carried just enough for me to hear fragments. No, he doesn't suspect anything. I know, I can't wait either. Soon, I promise. The worst part was how she'd started treating me, not just with indifference, but with active contempt. She'd roll her eyes when I spoke, dismiss my opinions, and make little comments designed to chip away at my self-confidence. It was like she was trying to justify her affair by convincing both of us that I deserved it. You know, Ray, she said one evening while we were eating dinner in silence, you've really let yourself go lately. When's the last time you went to a gym? I looked down at myself. I wasn't in bad shape for a 41-year-old warehouse manager. Not Shane's underwear model physique, but not embarrassing either. I get plenty of exercise at work. That's not the same thing. You should take care of yourself, for your own sake. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. She was giving me self-improvement advice while texting her lover on a secret phone. But I just nodded and said, You're probably right. Because I was learning something important. The best way to catch someone off guard is to let them think they have you completely figured out. A week later, June called. We need to meet, she said, and you're going to want to sit down for this. June's office smelled like coffee and disappointment, two things I'd become intimately familiar with over the past week. She had a manila folder on her desk that looked thick enough to contain someone's entire life story. In this case, it contained Shane Mallory's, and from the expression on June's face, it wasn't a bestseller. Your wife has interesting taste in men, June said, sliding the folder across her desk. Shane Mallory, 39, divorced twice, currently behind on child support to both ex-wives. His consulting business is mostly hot air and credit card debt. I opened the folder and started reading. Shane's business, Pinnacle Consulting Solutions, was registered to a P.O. box and had been operating at a loss for 3 years. His apartment was in a complex that advertised luxury living, but delivered budget accommodations with delusions of grandeur. Most interesting, he had a business partner named Lou Hendricks, who, according to June's research, was connected to some questionable gambling operations. Gets better, June continued. Your boy Shane has been using the gym where he works part-time as a cover story. Tells the ladies he's a fitness consultant there, but really he just wipes down equipment and sells protein shakes. The affair with your wife isn't his first rodeo with married women. How many others? 3 that I could confirm in the past 2 years. He's got a type: professional women, unhappy marriages, disposable income. He wines and dines them, makes them feel special, then usually hits them up for business investments or temporary loans. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Has he asked Harper for money? June flipped through her notes. Not yet, but based on the pattern he will. Usually happens around the 3-month mark. How long has this been going on? I thought about the timeline, the changes in Harper's behavior, the new clothes and mysterious phone calls. 3 months, maybe a little more. Then you're right on schedule. My guess is he's softening her up for something big. I spent the rest of that afternoon reading through June's report, memorizing every detail of Shane Mallory's pathetic life. By the time I finished, I understood exactly what Harper had gotten herself involved with. She thought she was having a passionate affair with a successful entrepreneur. In reality, she was being played by a small-time con artist who probably saw her as his next meal ticket. The question was, what was I going to do about it? That evening, I decided to do some reconnaissance of my own. I knew from Harper's secret phone that she was meeting Shane at a bar called the Blue Moon, a dive on the east side of town that catered to people who wanted to drink without being seen by their neighbors. I parked across the street and waited. Harper arrived first, wearing a red dress I'd never seen and enough perfume to signal ships at sea. She looked nervous, checking her phone constantly and glancing around like she expected someone to jump out of the shadows. Maybe her conscience was finally starting to bother her. Shane showed up 20 minutes later in his ridiculous Mustang, music thumping loud enough to wake the neighbors 3 blocks away. He was exactly what I'd expected from the photos: tall, tan, and wearing clothes that cost more than my weekly salary. The kind of guy who probably practiced his smile in the mirror and thought charm was a substitute for character. I watched them through the bar's front window, sitting in a corner booth where they thought they were invisible. Harper was animated, gesturing with her hands, laughing at everything Shane said. He had his arm around her, whispering in her ear, playing the part of the attentive lover perfectly. They stayed for 2 hours, and I stayed with them, taking pictures with my phone's camera and feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. When they finally left, Harper followed Shane to his apartment complex, a place called Riverside Gardens that was about as far from a river as you could get in Blackstone. I drove home alone, thinking about the woman I'd just watched. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years, more alive, more engaged, more like the person I'd married back when we both believed in happy endings. The realization hurt more than I'd expected. It wasn't just that she was cheating. It was that she was capable of being the woman I'd fallen in love with, just not with me. The next morning, Harper was practically glowing. She hummed while making coffee, smiled at her reflection in the hallway mirror, and actually kissed my cheek before leaving for work. It would have been sweet if I didn't know where that good mood was coming from. "You seem happy," I said. "Just a good day yesterday. Sometimes life surprises you, you know?" "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes it does." After she left, I sat in our kitchen and tried to figure out my next move. I had evidence of the affair, information about Shane's background, and a front-row seat to watch my marriage dissolve in real time. But what I didn't have was a plan. That's when my phone rang. It was Sam, one of my co-workers at the warehouse, and he sounded excited about something. "Ray, you're not going to believe this. Remember that guy you asked me about? Shane Mallory?" I'd mentioned Shane's name to Sam a few days earlier, claiming I thought I knew him from somewhere. Sam had a memory like a steel trap for faces and an encyclopedic knowledge of local gossip. "What about him?" "Dude, he's been in our building, had a key and everything, been coming in after hours, using the loading dock for something. Jimmy from night security told me about it." My grip tightened on the phone. "When?" "Past couple weeks. Jimmy said he looked legit, had paperwork and everything, so he didn't question it. But now that you mention his name, Jimmy remembered seeing him around town with some married lady. Thought you might want to know." I thanked Sam and hung up, my mind racing. Shane had access to my workplace, which meant he'd probably been inside our building, maybe even near my office. The thought of him in my space, using my world as part of his game with my wife, made my hands shake with anger. But then I realized something else. If Shane had been using our warehouse for whatever scheme he was running, that gave me leverage. Our building had security cameras, keycard logs, and enough documentation to hang someone who was using the facility without proper authorization. I called June and told her what I'd learned. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "This just got interesting. If he's been using your warehouse illegally, that's a crime. But more importantly, it means he's desperate enough to take risks. Desperate people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" The kind that give you options. Meet me tomorrow morning. I think it's time we started turning the tables. That night, Harper came home late again, full of stories about her demanding job and difficult clients. She was getting better at lying. I had to give her that. The stories were more detailed now, more believable. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have actually bought them. "How's the big project going?" I asked. "Complicated. My boss is really putting pressure on everyone, but I think we're making progress." "That's good. Hard work pays off." She looked at me strangely, like she was trying to figure out if there was a hidden meaning in my words. There wasn't, yet. But I was starting to formulate a plan, and when I was ready to put it into action, Harper and Shane were going to discover that underestimating Ray Donovan had been their first mistake. And if I had anything to say about it, it was going to be their last. The next morning, I met June at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from my usual haunts that we wouldn't be seen by anyone who might report back to Harper. June had that look that private investigators get when they've uncovered something juicy. "I did some more digging on Shane's warehouse visits," she said, sliding a new folder across the table. "Turns out your boy has been meeting with some interesting people there. Lou Hendricks, his business partner, plus a couple of guys who have connections to underground gambling operations." "Gambling?" "The kind where you bet other people's money and hope you can pay them back before they break your legs." "Shane's in deeper than I initially thought. He owes money to some very serious people, and he's running out of time to pay them back." I opened the folder and saw surveillance photos that June had somehow obtained, showing Shane meeting with rough-looking men in the warehouse parking lot. The conversations looked intense, and Shane's body language screamed desperation. "How much does he owe?" "50,000, maybe more, and these aren't the kind of creditors who accept payment plans." Suddenly, Shane's interest in Harper made perfect sense. He wasn't just looking for a good time. He was looking for a financial lifeline. Harper, with her steady job and our joint assets, probably looked like salvation to a man drowning in debt. "There's something else," June continued. "I've been monitoring Harper's social media, and she's been posting some interesting things. Complaints about you, hints that she's unhappy in her marriage, suggestions that she might be ready for a change." She showed me Harper's Facebook page on her tablet. I rarely looked at social media, but Harper was apparently an active user. Her recent posts painted a picture of a woman trapped in an unfulfilling relationship with an inattentive husband. She'd shared articles about emotional neglect, posted quotes about finding happiness, and made vague references to new beginnings. The comments from her friends were sympathetic and encouraging. "You deserve better, Harper. Life's too short to be unhappy. Maybe it's time to make a change." "She's building a narrative," June explained, "creating a public record of marital dissatisfaction. In a divorce, this kind of social media history can be valuable for establishing grounds and garnering sympathy." "You think she's planning to leave me?" "I think she's planning something. The question is whether she's going to give you a chance to respond, or if you're going to take control of the situation first." I stared at Harper's Facebook page, reading post after post that portrayed me as the villain in our marriage story. The worst part was that some of her complaints weren't entirely unfair. I had been distant lately, distracted by work and routine. I hadn't been the most attentive husband, but I also hadn't been cheating with a con artist while planning my spouse's public humiliation. "What do you recommend?" I asked June. She leaned back in her chair and studied me. "Depends on what you want to accomplish. Do you want to save your marriage, or do you want to win the war she's already started?" I thought about that question for the rest of the day. By the time I got home that evening, I had my answer. Harper had made her choice when she decided to betray our marriage and humiliate me in the process. Now it was time for me to make mine. The old Ray would have confronted her directly, tried to work things out, maybe suggested counseling. But the old Ray hadn't known what I knew now. The old Ray had been playing by rules that Harper had already thrown out the window. The new Ray was going to play a different game entirely. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is that you develop a talent for seeing things other people miss. While Harper was busy building her case for why I was a terrible husband, and Shane was planning how to spend my money, neither of them noticed that I was building a case of my own. June had given me copies of everything she'd found: Shane's financial records, photos of his meetings with questionable characters, documentation of his illegal use of our warehouse facilities. But information is only powerful if you know how to use it. And I was still learning the rules of this new game I'd been forced to play. That's when Harper made her first major mistake. I came home from work on a Thursday to find her on the phone in our bedroom, speaking in the low, intimate voice she used to reserve for me. The door was cracked open, and her words carried clearly into the hallway. "I know, baby, but I need more time. Ray's been asking questions, and I think he might be getting suspicious." A pause while Shane responded, "No, I don't think he knows anything for sure. He's not that smart. But we need to be careful." Another pause. "I've been documenting everything like you suggested. The social media posts, the complaints to my friends about how he treats me. When we're ready to make our move, I'll have plenty of evidence that this marriage was over long before I met you." I stood in the hallway recording every word on my phone, feeling like I was listening to strangers plan a crime. Because that's essentially what they were doing, planning to destroy my reputation and steal my assets, while making it look like I was the one who'd destroyed our marriage. "The warehouse thing is perfect," Harper continued. "If he gets in trouble at work, it'll just add to the narrative that he's unreliable and unstable, maybe even dangerous." That last word hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to take my money and humiliate me. They were planning to paint me as a threat. In the current social climate, an accusation of being dangerous could destroy a man's life even if it was completely fabricated. I backed away from the bedroom door and went to the kitchen, my mind racing. Harper and Shane weren't just having an affair. They were running a sophisticated con game designed to destroy me and leave them free to start a new life with my resources. But they'd made one crucial error. They'd assumed I was too stupid and too passive to fight back. That night, after Harper had gone to sleep, in the guest bedroom claiming she had a headache, I sat at my computer and began planning my counterattack. If Harper wanted to play the social media game, I was going to show her how it was really done. I started by creating anonymous accounts on various platforms, not to harass anyone, but to document and share information that was already public. Shane's business records, his divorce filings, his history of failed relationships with married women. All of it was available through public records, but scattered across different databases where most people wouldn't think to look. I compiled everything into a comprehensive profile of Shane Mallory, complete with photos, financial information, and a timeline of his romantic entanglements. Then I began sharing it strategically, posting links in local Facebook groups, community forums, and anywhere else that Blackstone residents gathered online. I didn't mention Harper or our marriage. I didn't have to. I just presented the facts about Shane and let people draw their own conclusions about the kind of man he was. The response was immediate and brutal. Within 24 hours, Shane's reputation in Blackstone was in ruins. People who'd been impressed by his flashy car and expensive clothes suddenly saw him for what he really was, a broke con artist who preyed on vulnerable women. But that was just the opening move. My next target was Shane's illegal use of our warehouse facility. I gathered all the security footage, keycard logs, and witness statements I could find, then presented them to my supervisor as a concerned employee who'd discovered a security breach. "This guy's been using our loading dock for unauthorized meetings," I told my boss, showing him the evidence. "Could be anything from stolen goods to illegal gambling. I thought you should know." My supervisor took the information seriously, as I knew he would. Within hours, Shane's access to the warehouse was revoked, and the company's legal department was reviewing whether to press charges for trespassing and unauthorized use of company property. Shane's reaction was swift and predictable. That evening, he called Harper in a panic, not knowing I was listening from the next room. "Someone's been digging into my business," he said, his voice tight with stress. "My reputation's being trashed online, and I just lost access to the warehouse." "Who would do that?" Harper asked, though I could hear the suspicion in her voice. "I don't know, but it has to be connected. Someone knows about us, Harper. Someone's trying to destroy me. Ray wouldn't. He's not smart enough to pull off something like this." There it was again, the casual dismissal of my intelligence that had become Harper's default setting. But I could hear doubt creeping into her voice. Maybe her dumb husband wasn't as dumb as she thought. Over the next few days, I watched Harper carefully, looking for signs that she was starting to panic. She became more secretive, more paranoid, checking her phone constantly and jumping every time it rang. She started asking me seemingly casual questions about my day, my activities, my interactions with coworkers. "Everything okay at work?" she asked one morning. "Same as always. Why?" "Just wondering. You seem different lately." "Different how?" "I don't know. More confident, maybe. Like you know something I don't." I looked at her over my coffee cup and smiled. Maybe I'm just finally learning to appreciate what I have. The confusion in her eyes was almost worth the months of betrayal. Almost. But I wasn't done yet. Shane's public humiliation and loss of warehouse access were just the beginning. I still had bigger plans, and Harper's growing paranoia was playing right into them. That weekend, Harper announced she was going to spend Saturday afternoon with her friend Trixie, shopping and getting their nails done. It was the perfect opportunity for the next phase of my plan. I followed them to the nail salon, then to the mall, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to observe. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. Harper wasn't just venting to Trixie about our marriage. She was actively recruiting her as an ally in whatever she and Shane were planning. I watched them through the window of a coffee shop, Harper gesturing animatedly, while Trixie nodded sympathetically. From their body language, it was clear that Harper was sharing intimate details about our relationship, probably painting me as an emotionally abusive husband who deserved whatever was coming to him. But Trixie's expression wasn't entirely sympathetic. She looked uncomfortable, even skeptical at times, like she wasn't buying everything Harper was selling. That gave me an idea. That evening, I made an anonymous call to Trixie's number. "You don't know me," I said, disguising my voice, "but I thought you should know that your friend Harper is being played by a con artist named Shane Mallory. He's done this before with other married women. Check the public records. It's all there." I hung up before she could respond, but I'd planted the seed. If Trixie was really Harper's friend, she'd do her own research and discover the truth about Shane. And if she was truly loyal to Harper, she'd warn her that she was being manipulated by a professional predator. Either way, it would create doubt and suspicion in Harper's inner circle, making her feel more isolated and vulnerable. The next few days were tense. Harper's paranoia was increasing, and Shane was becoming more desperate as his reputation continued to crumble. The online campaign against him had taken on a life of its own, with local residents sharing stories about their own encounters with him and warning others to stay away. His business was collapsing, his creditors were circling, and his access to the resources he'd been using to impress Harper was disappearing. He was running out of options, which made him dangerous in a different way. That's when Harper made her second major mistake. I came home from work on a Tuesday to find her waiting for me in the living room, her face flushed with anger and accusation. "I know it's you," she said without preamble. "I know what's me. Don't play dumb, Ray. The attacks on Shane, the online harassment, all of it. You're trying to destroy him because you're jealous." I sat down across from her, keeping my expression neutral. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Shane's a good man who's trying to build a business, and you're sabotaging him because you can't stand to see someone else succeed." The irony was breathtaking. Harper was defending a man who was planning to use her to pay off his gambling debts, while accusing me, her husband of 12 years, of being petty and vindictive. "Harper," I said carefully, "I don't know Shane well enough to have any opinion about his business success or failure." "That's a lie. You've been investigating him, haven't you? Digging into his personal life, spreading rumors about him online?" "Why would I do that?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to decide how much to reveal. Finally, she said, "Because you know I've been seeing him." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. Harper had just confessed to her affair, not because she wanted to come clean, but because she was trying to justify it by painting me as the aggressor. "You've been seeing him," I repeated, keeping my voice level. "Yes. And before you start acting like the victim, you should know that this marriage has been over for years. We're just two people living in the same house, going through the motions. Shane makes me feel alive again." "I see. That's it? That's all you have to say?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I'd married would never have betrayed our vows, lied to my face for months, or tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the villain in our story. "What would you like me to say, Harper?" "I want you to admit that you've been harassing Shane. I want you to stop whatever game you're playing and let us be happy." "And if I don't?" Her expression hardened. "Then things are going to get very difficult for you. Shane has evidence that you've been stalking him, threatening him, using your position at the warehouse to damage his business. One phone call to your supervisor, and you'll be looking for a new job." I nodded, slowly, finally understanding the full scope of their plan. They weren't just going to frame me as an abusive husband. They were going to destroy my career and reputation, leaving me with nothing while they rode off into the sunset with my assets. "That sounds like a threat, Harper." "It's a promise. Leave Shane alone or face the consequences." I stood up and looked down at my wife, this woman who thought she was so clever, so sophisticated, so much smarter than her blue-collar husband. "Okay," I said, "I'll leave Shane alone." The relief on her face was almost pitiful. She actually thought she'd won, that her intimidation had worked, that I was going to roll over and let them destroy me without a fight. She had no idea that the real war was just beginning. Harper's ultimatum had revealed the full scope of their plan, but it had also given me something invaluable, confirmation that they considered me defeated. In their minds, the stupid warehouse manager had been outmaneuvered by his superior wife and her sophisticated lover. They were so confident in their victory that they'd stopped being careful. That was going to be their downfall. The next morning, Harper was practically bouncing around the kitchen, humming while she made coffee and checking her phone with the satisfied smile of someone who'd just solved a major problem. She probably couldn't wait to tell Shane how easily she'd handled me. "You seem happy," I observed. "I'm just glad we cleared the air last night. Honesty is always the best policy." The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast, but I just nodded and said, "Absolutely." After she left for work, I called June and arranged to meet her at our usual coffee shop. I had a new strategy to discuss, one that would require her particular skills and connections. "They think they've won," I told her, explaining Harper's ultimatum and threats. "They're so confident that they're not bothering to cover their tracks anymore." June listened with the expression of a professional who'd seen this story play out many times before. Overconfidence makes people sloppy. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to give them exactly what they think they want, a defeated husband who's given up the fight. But while they're celebrating their victory, I'm going to be documenting everything they do." A honey trap. Exactly. Let them think they're safe, and they'll reveal the full extent of their plans. Harper's already admitted to the affair, but I need evidence of the fraud, the conspiracy to destroy my career, and whatever financial schemes they're planning. June smiled. "I like it. What do you need from me?" "Surveillance equipment. I want to record everything, phone calls, meetings, conversations in our house. When this is over, I want a complete record of what they've been planning. That's going to be expensive. I don't care. They want to play games with my life? I'm going to make sure everyone sees exactly what kind of people they really are. June agreed to help, and within 2 days, our house was equipped with hidden cameras and recording devices in every common area. Nothing in bedrooms or bathrooms. I wasn't interested in violating anyone's privacy. But every conversation they had in my living room, kitchen, or home office would be preserved for posterity. I also installed monitoring software on our home computer and Wi-Fi network, allowing me to see every website Harper visited, every email she sent, and every social media post she made. It was all legal. The equipment was in my own house, and Harper's online activities were on accounts that used our shared internet connection. The results were immediate and devastating. Harper's private messages revealed the full scope of their conspiracy. She and Shane weren't just planning to frame me as an abusive husband. They were planning to claim I'd threatened Shane physically, creating grounds for a restraining order that would force me out of my own house. Once I was gone, Harper would have uncontested access to our joint accounts, our property, and anything else they could liquidate quickly. Shane's gambling debts weren't just motivating the scam. They were creating a timeline. He owed money to people who didn't accept late payments, and Harper was his only chance of getting the cash he needed to survive. But the most damning evidence came from their recorded conversations in our house. 3 days after Harper's ultimatum, Shane came over for what they thought was a private strategy session. "Ray's completely beaten," Harper told him, pouring wine in our living room while hidden cameras recorded everything. "He actually apologized for harassing you. I think he's finally realized he can't compete." "Good," Shane replied. "Because my creditors are getting impatient. I need that money within 2 weeks or things are going to get ugly." "How much do we need?" $75,000 to clear everything and give us a fresh start. Your joint savings account has 40, and if we can get Ray out of the house, we can refinance the mortgage for the rest." Harper nodded. "The restraining order should do it. Once I file the complaint about threats and intimidation, the court will force him to leave. Then we'll have all the time we need." "What if he fights it?" "He won't. Ray's not a fighter, he's a victim. Always has been. He'll probably move in with his brother and spend the next year feeling sorry for himself." They spent the next hour planning my destruction in detail, discussing how to forge evidence of threats, which friends Harper would recruit as witnesses, and how quickly they could liquidate our assets once I was gone. They talked about me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a human being whose life they were planning to destroy. But the most revealing moment came when Shane asked Harper if she felt guilty about what they were doing. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Ray's not a bad person, just boring, predictable. He never surprised me, never made me feel special. It's like being married to a piece of furniture. You deserve better. I know, and after this is over, I'll have it. We'll have it." They sealed their pact with a kiss in my living room, on the couch where Harper and I used to watch movies together, completely unaware that every word and gesture was being recorded in high definition. I watched the footage that night in my home office, feeling a mixture of rage and satisfaction. Rage at the casual cruelty of their plan, satisfaction at having documented their conspiracy so thoroughly. When this was over, there would be no question about who the real victims were, but I still needed more evidence, particularly of Shane's financial crimes and his connections to illegal gambling operations. That's where June's law enforcement contacts became invaluable. "I showed the warehouse footage to a friend of mine in the police department," she told me during our next meeting. "Shane's business partner, Lou Hendricks, is connected to a gambling ring that's been under investigation for months. If we can tie Shane directly to their operations, it becomes a criminal matter." "How do we do that?" "We give Shane enough rope to hang himself. He's desperate for money, and desperate people make desperate choices. If we can create a situation where he has to reveal his criminal connections, he'll incriminate himself, trying to save himself." "Exactly." June's plan was elegant in its simplicity. She would approach Shane anonymously, posing as someone who'd heard he was in financial trouble and might be interested in a lucrative but risky business opportunity. If Shane was as desperate as we believed, he'd jump at the chance to make quick money, especially if it meant he could pay off his debts without having to wait for Harper's divorce settlement. The trap was set within days. June, using a fake identity and burner phone, contacted Shane about a transportation opportunity that would pay $20,000 for a single night's work. No details over the phone, but if he was interested, they could meet to discuss specifics. Shane took the bait immediately. The meeting was set for a parking lot behind an abandoned shopping center, the kind of place where legitimate business deals never happened. June wore a wire and brought backup, 2 off-duty police officers who would serve as witnesses if Shane said anything incriminating. I watched from a distance as Shane arrived in his ridiculous Mustang, looking nervous but eager. The conversation that followed was recorded in its entirety, and it was everything we'd hoped for. Shane not only admitted to his gambling debts and connections to illegal operations, but he also bragged about his plan to scam Harper out of her assets. He described me as a pathetic loser who would never see it coming, and detailed how he and Harper were going to frame me for harassment and threats. "The wife's got it all figured out," he told June's undercover persona. "She's been documenting everything, building a case that her husband's unstable and dangerous. Once we get the restraining order, we'll have access to everything. House, savings, the works. Should be enough to clear my debts and set us up somewhere new." "What if the husband fights back?" Shane laughed. "Ray, he's a warehouse manager who thinks negotiation means asking nicely. He's already rolled over and given up. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be long gone with his money." The recording was pure gold, a complete confession to fraud, conspiracy, and criminal conspiracy. But June wasn't done yet. "Sounds risky," she said. "What if something goes wrong?" "It won't. But even if it does, I've got insurance. Lou's crew knows how to handle problems, if you know what I mean. Ray's not going to be an issue." That last statement was what we'd been hoping for, a clear threat of violence that would transform Shane's financial crimes into something much more serious. Conspiracy to commit fraud was one thing, but threatening violence to cover up criminal activity was a felony that would put Shane away for years. June ended the meeting by telling Shane she'd be in touch, then immediately took the recording to her police contact. Within hours, Shane Mallory was under active criminal investigation for fraud, conspiracy, and making terroristic threats. But I still wasn't ready to spring the trap. I wanted Harper to be completely exposed as well, and that meant letting their plan advance to the point where she actually filed false charges against me. It was a risky strategy. If something went wrong, I could end up arrested and removed from my own house before I had a chance to present my evidence. But it was the only way to prove that Harper was an active participant in the conspiracy, rather than just an innocent woman who'd been manipulated by a con artist. So I continued playing the role of the defeated husband, letting Harper and Shane believe they'd won, while secretly documenting every step of their plan to destroy me. The final phase was about to begin, and when it was over, everyone in Blackstone would know exactly what kind of people Harper Donovan and Shane Mallory really were. The beauty of watching your enemies destroy themselves is that you don't have to do much except stay out of their way and document the carnage. Harper and Shane had become so confident in their plan that they'd stopped pretending to be careful, conducting their conspiracy in my own house while hidden cameras recorded everything. Their timeline was accelerating. Shane's creditors were applying pressure, and Harper was getting anxious about maintaining the pretense of our marriage. They'd set a date, Friday, exactly 1 week away, for Harper to file her restraining order petition, claiming I'd been harassing Shane and making threats against both of them. I spent that week playing the perfect victim, acting defeated and withdrawn, while secretly preparing for the most satisfying reveal of my life. Every conversation was recorded, every text message was copied, and every piece of evidence was organized into a comprehensive file that would leave no doubt about what they'd been planning. The most damning evidence came from Harper's phone calls with her friend Trixie, who had apparently become uncomfortable with Harper's increasingly elaborate lies about our marriage. "I don't know, Harper," Trixie said during a conversation I recorded on Wednesday evening. "Ray's always seemed like a decent guy to me. Are you sure he actually threatened Shane?" "Of course I'm sure," Harper replied, her voice sharp with irritation. "You didn't see how angry he got when he found out about us. He was practically shaking with rage. But threatening someone? That doesn't sound like Ray." "People aren't always what they seem, Trix. Ray's been controlling and emotionally abusive for years. The threats are just an escalation of his existing behavior." I listened to my wife casually rewrite the history of our marriage, turning 12 years of partnership into a narrative of abuse and control. Every disagreement became evidence of my violent nature. Every moment of frustration became proof of my instability. But Trixie wasn't buying it entirely. "If he's been abusive, why didn't you ever mention it before? You've complained about him being boring and inattentive, but you never said he was dangerous." Harper's pause was telling. "I was protecting him, I guess, making excuses for his behavior, but I can't do that anymore. Not when Shane's safety is at stake." "Harper, are you absolutely sure about this Shane guy?" "I did some research like you asked, and there are some concerning things online about him." "What kind of things?" "Financial problems, failed businesses, a pattern of relationships with married women. It looks like he might be using you." Harper's response was immediate and vicious. "I can't believe you're taking Ray's side in this. Shane is a successful entrepreneur who's been targeted by jealous competitors. The smear campaign against him is just proof that Ray's more dangerous than I thought." "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm trying to look out for you. Then support me. I need my friends right now, not more people questioning my judgment." The conversation ended with Trixie reluctantly agreeing to serve as a witness for Harper's restraining order petition, though her reluctance was obvious. Harper had successfully isolated herself from the one person who might have talked her out of her destructive plan. Thursday night, Shane came over for what they planned as their final strategy session before filing the false charges. I was supposedly at my brother Mike's house, giving them privacy to finalize their conspiracy. In reality, I was in my home office with the door locked, watching and recording everything through the hidden camera system. "Tomorrow's the big day," Shane said, settling onto my couch with a beer from my refrigerator. "You ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Harper replied. "I've got all the documentation prepared. Screenshots of threatening texts that Ray never actually sent, a detailed timeline of escalating harassment, witness statements from friends who will swear they saw evidence of abuse." "What about physical evidence?" Harper smiled and pulled out her phone, showing Shane a photo of herself with a bruised cheek. "Makeup's a wonderful thing. This will be Exhibit A in my petition." "Jesus, Harper, you look like you went 10 rounds with a heavyweight." "That's the idea. The judge will take one look at this and grant the restraining order immediately. Ray will be out of the house by Monday, and will have access to everything." They spent the next hour rehearsing Harper's testimony, making sure their stories aligned perfectly. Shane coached her on how to appear vulnerable and frightened, while Harper practiced delivering her lies with just the right combination of strength and victimhood. "Remember," Shane said, "you're not just a battered wife. You're a survivor who's finally found the courage to fight back. The judge needs to see you as someone who's been pushed to the breaking point but is determined to reclaim her life." What if Ray tries to defend himself? He won't. He's too passive, too concerned with what people think. He'll probably just stand there looking confused while you destroy his reputation. And if he does try to fight back? Shane's expression darkened. Then Lou's crew will pay him a visit. Make it clear that fighting back isn't in his best interest. There it was. Another recorded threat of violence, this time with specific mention of Shane's criminal associates. The evidence against them was so overwhelming that I almost felt sorry for how completely they'd incriminated themselves. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that makes you appreciate being alive. Harper left early for her appointment with a lawyer, claiming she had an important meeting at work. She was practically glowing with anticipation, finally about to execute the plan she'd been building for months. I went to work as usual, but I'd already arranged to leave early for a personal emergency. By noon, I was sitting in June's office, reviewing the final preparations for our counterattack. "Everything's ready," June said, organizing the evidence files on her desk. "Police reports, criminal investigation updates, recorded confessions, financial records. We've got enough documentation to bury both of them." "What's the timeline?" "Harper should be filing her petition around 2 o'clock. The court will review it and likely issue a temporary restraining order by 4, which means you'll be served with papers by 5. That's when we make our move." "And Shane?" "He's being arrested as we speak. The criminal investigation has enough evidence to charge him with fraud, conspiracy, and making terroristic threats. He'll be in custody before Harper even realizes what's happening." I felt a surge of satisfaction. While Harper was in court lying about me, Shane was being handcuffed and read his rights. The timing was perfect. She'd be completely on her own when the truth came out. At 4:30, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door with the restraining order papers. Harper's petition was a masterpiece of creative writing, describing years of psychological abuse, escalating threats, and a pattern of controlling behavior that painted me as a dangerous predator. The fake photo of her bruised face was included as evidence, along with forged text messages and witness statements from friends who'd been manipulated into supporting her lies. It was a comprehensive character assassination designed to destroy my reputation and justify taking everything I'd worked for. But Harper had made one crucial error in her petition. She'd included specific details about Shane's harassment by her unstable husband, creating a direct connection between her false charges and his criminal activities. When Shane's arrest became public knowledge, Harper's lies would be exposed as part of a larger conspiracy. The deputy who served the papers was professional, but sympathetic. "Sir, I have to advise you that you're required to stay away from your wife and her residence until the court hearing next week. Do you have somewhere to stay?" "Yes, officer. I'll be staying with my brother." "Good. And sir, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've learned to recognize genuine domestic violence cases. This one, well, let's just say I hope you have a good lawyer." After the deputy left, I called Mike and told him I'd be staying at his place for a few days. Then I called June and gave her the signal to begin phase 2 of our plan. "It's time," I said. "Release everything." Within an hour, every piece of evidence we'd gathered was being distributed through multiple channels. The recorded conversations were posted anonymously on social media platforms. Shane's criminal arrest was reported to local news outlets, and Harper's fake petition was contrasted with the documented proof of her conspiracy. The response was immediate and explosive. Harper's Facebook page was flooded with comments from people who'd heard the recordings of her planning my destruction. Her friends and co-workers were tagged in posts that revealed the truth about her affair and the elaborate fraud she'd attempted to perpetrate. Shane's arrest made the evening news, complete with details about his gambling debts, criminal associates, and history of targeting married women. The reporter specifically mentioned his connection to a local woman who'd filed false domestic violence charges as part of the conspiracy. By 8 o'clock, Harper's reputation in Blackstone was completely destroyed. Her own social media posts about marital unhappiness were being shared alongside recordings of her admitting the whole thing was a setup. The contrast between her public victim narrative and her private confession was devastating. But the most satisfying moment came when Harper called me, her voice shaking with rage and panic. "What have you done?" she screamed into the phone. "I documented the truth," I replied calmly. "Everything you and Shane planned, everything you said, everything you did, it's all public record now." "You can't do this! I'll sue you for invasion of privacy." "Everything was recorded in my own house, Harper. My house, my equipment, my legal right to document what happens under my own roof. Your lawyer will explain the details when you hire one to defend against the fraud charges. What fraud charges? The ones that will be filed Monday morning. Falsifying evidence, filing false police reports, conspiracy to commit fraud. You and Shane have been busy. The district attorney is very interested in your case. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Harper was finally beginning to understand the scope of what she'd lost. "Ray," she said, her voice now pleading rather than angry, "we can work this out. It was Shane's idea, all of it. He manipulated me, made me think you were the enemy. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Harper. You spent months planning to destroy my life, steal my money, and frame me for crimes I never committed, and you enjoyed every minute of it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk about this? We'll talk plenty during the court proceedings. You wanted honesty, Harper? You're about to get more honesty than you ever imagined." I hung up and sat back in Mike's guest room, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war was over, and I'd won more decisively than I'd ever dared to hope. Harper and Shane had underestimated the quiet warehouse manager, assuming he'd be too passive and too stupid to fight back. They'd planned my destruction with the casual cruelty of people who considered themselves superior to their victim. But they'd forgotten one important thing. Underestimating someone is the first step toward being destroyed by them. The weekend that followed was surreal. While I stayed at Mike's house, watching the fallout from Harper and Shane's exposed conspiracy unfold across social media and local news, Harper was trapped in our house. The same house she'd planned to steal from me, dealing with the consequences of her choices. Shane was in county lockup, denied bail due to his connections to organized gambling and the flight risk posed by his desperate financial situation. His arrest had made the front page of the Blackstone Herald, complete with a photo of him being led away in handcuffs and a detailed explanation of the fraud conspiracy that had brought him down. But Harper's situation was even worse in some ways. Shane would eventually face trial, serve his sentence, and move on with his life. Harper had to live in the community where everyone now knew exactly what kind of person she was. The recordings of her planning my destruction had gone viral in our small city. Local Facebook groups shared them constantly, accompanied by commentary about the dangers of false accusations and the lengths some people would go to for money. Harper's fake bruise photo was being used as an example of how easily evidence could be fabricated. Her employer, a respectable accounting firm that valued its reputation above all else, had placed her on administrative leave pending an investigation. Her friends had abandoned her one by one as the truth became undeniable. Even Trixie, who'd reluctantly agreed to support Harper's lies, publicly apologized for being deceived and withdrew her witness statement. Sunday evening, Mike and I were sitting on his porch, sharing a beer and watching the sun set over Blackstone, when my phone rang. It was Harper calling from our house. "Ray, please, I need to talk to you. We have nothing to discuss until the court hearing. I'm dropping the restraining order. I'll call the court tomorrow and withdraw the petition." "That's your choice, but it won't change anything. The fraud charges are being filed regardless." "I know, I wanted you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. Shane said it would be simple, clean, just enough to get a quick divorce settlement and start over." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Harper, you plan to have me arrested on false charges, steal our joint assets, and destroy my reputation. How exactly did you think that was going to be clean?" "I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. Shane made it all seem so reasonable, so justified. He said you'd be better off without me anyway." "Shane was a con artist who saw you as a mark, Harper. He would have taken your money and disappeared the moment his debts were paid." "I know that now. The police told me about his history, the other women he'd scammed. I was just another victim to him." "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "You weren't a victim, Harper. You were a willing participant. You chose to betray our marriage, lie to our friends, and plan my destruction. Shane didn't force you to do any of that." The silence stretched between us, filled with 12 years of shared history that had been poisoned by her choices. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you face the consequences of what you've done. The district attorney will decide whether to prosecute you for fraud. Our mutual friends will decide whether they can forgive you for lying to them. And I'll decide whether I can ever trust you enough to be in the same room with you again. Goodbye, Harper." I hung up and handed the phone to Mike, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation with the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I think I am." "What's next?" "Tomorrow I go back to work, back to my house, back to my life. Harper can figure out what to do with hers." Monday morning brought a sense of normalcy I hadn't felt in months. I returned to the warehouse to find my co-workers treating me like a returning war hero. The story of Harper and Shane's conspiracy had made me something of a local celebrity, the quiet guy who'd outsmarted the people trying to destroy him. "Ray!" Sam called out as I walked through the loading dock. "Man, I can't believe what those two were planning. You're like a real-life detective or something." My supervisor pulled me aside to apologize for not catching Shane's unauthorized use of our facility sooner, and to commend me for bringing the security breach to his attention. The company was considering offering me a promotion to security coordinator, a position that would come with a significant raise and more responsibility. "You showed real initiative in handling this situation," he told me, "the kind of thinking we need in management." The irony wasn't lost on me. Harper had always dismissed my intelligence and ambition, claiming I'd never amount to anything more than a warehouse worker. Now her attempt to destroy my career had actually enhanced it. That afternoon, I returned to my house for the first time since being served with the restraining order. Harper's car was gone from the driveway, and a note on the kitchen table explained that she'd gone to stay with her sister in another state while the legal situation resolved itself. The house felt different, cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the rooms. I walked through each space, remembering the conversations Harper and Shane had held there while planning my destruction, but the anger I'd felt was gone. In its place was something that felt like relief. My phone rang. It was June, calling with an update on the legal proceedings. "Shane's been formally charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false reports, and making terroristic threats," she reported. "He's looking at 5 to 7 years if convicted. His lawyer's already talking about a plea bargain." "What about Harper?" "The district attorney is still deciding. Her cooperation in Shane's case might work in her favor, but the evidence of her active participation is pretty damning. My guess is she'll face charges, but probably get a suspended sentence and probation if she pleads guilty." "And the restraining order?" "Officially withdrawn this morning. You're free to return to your normal life." Normal life. The phrase felt strange after months of living in the shadow of Harper's betrayal and conspiracy, but maybe that's exactly what I needed. A return to the simple, predictable existence that Harper had found so boring. That evening, I sat in my living room, the same room where Harper and Shane had planned my destruction, and tried to process everything that had happened. 6 months ago, I'd been a faithful husband in what I thought was a stable marriage. Now I was a single man whose wife was facing criminal charges for trying to destroy him. The transformation should have felt traumatic, but instead it felt like waking up from a long, confusing dream. I was finally seeing my life clearly, without the distortion of Harper's lies and manipulations. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Beer? You've earned it." I was about to respond when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Harper getting out of her sedan, moving slowly like someone who'd aged years in the past few days. She knocked on the door, her own door, to the house she'd tried to steal from me, and waited for me to answer. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said when I opened the door. "But I needed to get some things. and I wanted to talk to you one more time. Come in." She stepped into our living room and looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. "It feels different." "Everything's different, Harper." "I know. I wanted you to understand why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, just to explain." I gestured to the couch where she'd planned my destruction with Shane, and she sat down carefully, like she was afraid it might collapse under her. "I felt invisible," she said. "In our marriage, in my job, in my life. Like I was just going through the motions of being alive without actually living. Shane made me feel seen, important, exciting." "So you decided to destroy me?" "I decided to escape. The plan to frame you was Shane's idea, but I went along with it, because it seemed like the only way to start over without losing everything I'd worked for." "You were willing to send me to prison for crimes I didn't commit." Harper's composure finally cracked, and she started crying. Real tears this time, not the calculated performance she'd planned for court. I know how horrible that is. I convinced myself you'd be fine, that you'd bounce back, that maybe you'd even be better off without me. But I was just telling myself lies to justify what I knew was wrong. I watched my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, fall apart in our living room, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but genuine sadness for the person she'd become. "Harper," I said gently, "I hope you get the help you need. I hope you find a way to build a life that makes you happy without destroying other people. But that life can't include me." She nodded, wiping her eyes with tissues from the box on our coffee table. "I know. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry for what I did to you, to us, to everything we built together. I believe you. Do you think, someday, we might be able to be friends?" I considered the question seriously. Could I ever trust Harper enough to have her in my life again? Could I look at her without remembering the months of lies, the careful planning of my destruction, the casual cruelty with which she'd discussed ruining me? "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not anytime soon." She gathered her things quickly after that. Clothes, personal items, mementos from our shared life that now belonged to a different version of ourselves. I helped her carry boxes to her car, both of us moving with the careful politeness of strangers. "Take care of yourself, Ray," she said as she got behind the wheel. "You too, Harper." I watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into the autumn darkness, and realized that this was really the end. Not the dramatic confrontation I'd imagined, not the satisfying revenge I'd planned, but a quiet, sad conclusion to 12 years of shared history. My phone buzzed again. Mike, still waiting for an answer about beer. "On my way," I texted back. I locked the house, my house now, and walked to my truck. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new possibilities for the life I was finally free to build. Harper and Shane had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they'd given me something valuable, the knowledge that I was stronger, smarter, and more resilient than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. As I drove through the streets of Blackstone toward Mike's house, I found myself smiling. It had been a long time since I'd looked forward to tomorrow, but tonight felt like the beginning of something better. The last laugh, as it turned out, was mine after all.